Masnar I am Tahir Dhindsa and you're watching SDTV. Nowadays, carbon footprint and emissions and the utility of energy and optimizing the use of energy, good production, optimizing, it's all sort of jargons. But now the world is coming together seriously on one thing, that the emissions have to be reduced, because it seems to be that it's no more sustainable and the tipping point is approaching very fast, where it would be no longer possible to meet that target. I don't know, 1.5 or 2 something, but somebody was saying that they say that even the 3-degree would not be achievable if we don't act quickly and decisively across the board. Steel is one industry which is also need, thermal energy a lot. You have to melt it into a burette sometimes, or otherwise, even if it's the cast iron, you have to mold it. You need energy for that. So there is a carbon footprint, and obviously efficiency. They are efficient and they have their own scale. We have today with us a very eminent expert on this area who has done audit of various large industries like cement and steel and other large industries, and he knows the subject, how to deal with it, and how the industry could be optimized for a better production. I say welcome to Mr. Fridolin Holm. You are an expert in the area. If you want to introduce a little bit more on that, please do that, and then start giving us some basic premise on the what I've just said.
Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate being a guest on your program here.
Right.
Very delighted to be here. And the topic today is very much in my sort of daily work. I've been working with optimizing big industry, reducing their carbon footprint for the last 15, 20 years globally. I'm an engineer as a background, and I'm from a company called Viken and Moe, which is a Danish company. I'm a partner in the company. And we see, we do auditing and we help a lot of different industries becoming or improving their carbon footprint. Even some of them have high ambition of becoming carbon neutral. So making a strategy for them of how to become that. And then also some of them helping them implementing the strategy afterwards. So being a part of the different part of sort of that whole development chain of becoming carbon neutral or towards becoming carbon neutral. And I think today's topic is the steel industry, but some of the mechanisms behind the effort of becoming more efficient goes for all industries. If you're in the food and beverage industry or you're in the steel industry, it's the same sort of principle approach that you should take.
So what are the trends nowadays globally, especially on the steel?
I think that the trends globally is that we are, there are some overall mechanisms that pressure the industries, and that is, of course, the decarbonization of the industries. So there are schemes, for instance, if you want to trade into Europe, there's the CBAM set up, which hits the steel industry in Pakistan at the moment, and other industries will follow into that path. And that is a way of sort of pressurizing the industry becoming more efficient in terms of the carbon footprint. And then, of course, there's the whole sort of trading regime that, again, then, because there's a high sort of competitive, there's a very high competitive market, the steel market. So there's also a very high pressure of getting the production costs down. So at the same time, you can be more efficient, reduce your carbon footprint, but what is more important also for the industry is getting the specific costs, production costs down. And often these optimizations goes hand in hand, and this is what we see goes for all industries. And then finally, there's also sort of a technology shift that goes both when we look into the processes itself, but also in terms of the energy source that is being used by the industry. So before we could just use, let's say, natural gas, we could use coal, we could use oil as our primary energy source. But now there is a technology shift that we look towards more carbon-friendly technologies. We produce our electricity by wind, by solar, by hydropower. So by other means, there's also an option. We see that in many, also in steel industries, that turns towards hydrogen. So hydrogen can be used both directly in the process, but can also be used as a buffer, so you get some flexibility and get higher utilization of your sort of energy production if you produce it on wind or solar, where you have fluctuations.
All right. If we zoom in, or literally zero in on Pakistan, what is the situation? What do you see? Where are the gaps? What is the scope,
I think,
especially on steel?
yeah, there are several challenges in terms of becoming carbon neutral in the steel industry. And one, if we look towards the whole distribution network, so how can you get your energy as with a low carbon footprint as possible? You have many sort of natural resources. You have a lot of wind. You have sort of these wind channels in several places in Pakistan. You have a lot of solar, so you have big potential for utilizing the solar energy, and you also have hydropower. So I think in terms of utilizing these resources that you have available, then the key figure here is to have a more stable network, so having bigger connections, and also instead of having one or several sort of big producers, then try to have a more sort of widespread net, making sure that if somebody fails for some reason, then other can easily back up. It doesn't have that much influence on
Right.
your security of supply.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, say something if you're saying. Okay. But yeah. Please go ahead.
Okay. And then if we look, that's from the sort of supply side or supply perspective. And then if we look into to the companies themselves, of course, there's first of all to reduce the demand, and that is easier said than done, because of course, if you're designing a new plant from scratch, you can design it with all the newest technology and so on. But if you have an existing plant, sort of reinvesting in optimizing can be difficult if you only do it from a carbon or an energy perspective, because let's say you want to replace a motor with another motor that is more efficient, it can be the payback time might not be that attractive for replacing such a motor itself. So you should find other arguments for doing that. So let's say we could use the decarbonization as an argument. That is both that you save energy by installing a more efficient motor. You can save sort of the tax that you get if you export to Europe on the CBAM, but you also have the market value that's saying now you can produce steel with a lower footprint, because there's also a trend, and when you're constructing a building, the owner of that building or the entrepreneur, they might want to build a building with as low carbon footprint as possible. So they will source all the raw material for building that building with the lowest carbon footprint as possible. So if they can buy steel from a producer that has a low carbon footprint, they will sort of prefer that over another. So you can gain a sort of a market advantage of that. And of course, that's hard to set a price on.
Yes. You must be knowing it, or at least you have heard is that the Pakistan is number one on rooftop solars. Out of pocket, the public has invested in creating so much. I mean, billions invested in that, and Pakistan is and Pakistan has trodden that path in months. which the other countries have taken years to do, and some of them may still not reach. But the principal reason was demand side. Because of the very high tariff of the electricity, the switch. Do you think there is some demand appetite at the moment at the steel industry right now? Because if they use gas, natural gas, and coal, and they want to switch, what do you say on that?
I think if you look at the demand side,
Demand
there's
incentive, incentive
there's
on
an
the demand side.
one problem or one challenge is that the location of the industries are often within a very dense
Populated area.
populated area.
Yes.
So building solar, because the demand for energy is so high on a steel plant, then you need a lot of sort of square
Space.
meters for space for setting up this system. That I think that is one problem. And I think that's also that it needs. I think it's if you should succeed in solving the demand side, it needs to be on a sort of governmental level that it needs to be solved. It's it will be hard. It will be hard for the individual sort of very high energy intensive consumer to solve that themselves due to space issue. That is easier. Not saying that is easy, but for a private household to install a rooftop panel because that can cover sort of their own demand. Then if you should, let's say there's an example of one of the first carbon neutral steel production sites in the world is in Sweden, just north of Denmark, and they have based the whole steel production on. They have converted from a fossil-based production to 100% electrical-based production, and then they introduce hydrogen as an energy carrier, so they convert some of the electricity into hydrogen. And then you can discuss, is that something that the company should do themselves, or should you have some kind of hydrogen grid that can supply multiple factories with hydrogen as a fuel?
So you're saying that there should be a supply chain of energy as well. Use electricity produced as renewable, produce hydrogen yourself, and switch. I mean, then, excuse me, use hydrogen for the furnace. Are you saying that?
Yeah.
It's a long
So
process. Do you think that the companies have so much acumen and the will, at least the financial will, to do it?
I think it is difficult to do, and I will also say if I should look at it from a Pakistani perspective, I think going for a hydrogen, sort of the high, very high efficient solution with hydrogen, a very advanced electrical grid is not the first choice. I think the first choice is to be more efficient in the way that energy is used, so reducing the demand. So having energy audits, as I did in Pakistan when I was there, having an energy audit, identifying all the options for reducing the demand, and then start working on that as a starting point. And then I think if we are talking about large investment, know that the majority of the steel industry in Pakistan is based on induction furnace technology, and there could, I mean, it should be considered a switch towards electric arc furnace, which are more sort of efficient technology for melting, and then maybe also designing for continuous production instead of sort of more batch production as is. That's also much more efficient,
Right.
having a continuous casting process.
Right. For steel industry in Pakistan, what are the few low hanging fruits?
Yeah, I think the low hanging fruit is Let's take the scenario that we are looking at in a steel production plant where you have an induction furnace, you have a reheating furnace, and then you have a whole sort of re-rolling process, which is a very sort of common setup. So there is the induction furnace in itself. There is a number of ways that this could be optimized in terms of cooling, in terms of control system. So looking into the control system of the induction furnace part, I think is one key element. Then there's another one. If you look at the reheating furnace, if you cannot switch over to a more continuous casting process where you can skip the reheating, but then if you have the reheating anyway, then you should look at it again, then the control part, making sure that you are not overheating, spending too much energy in something that you do not get anything out of, making sure that you reuse the energy as much as possible, making sure that you reduce the losses with better insulation, making sure that all openings are closed. So that was, I would say, that was the three main things regarding the reheating. And then there's the whole rolling part. There's a number of different options here. And the rolling part is you use a lot of electricity for the rolling. So again, then looking at control, how do you control the different rollers? Do you have varying frequency drive motors? Are the motors high efficient? How do you transport your iron or your steel? So looking into this, if you look at it from a thermodynamic perspective, there are also some cooling processes. And then again, looking into controlling the cooling system, not just circulating a lot of water if you don't need it. So again, then be very much focused on what is the actually energy service that you need to provide and making sure that this is what you provide and nothing else.
Right.
So be a bit more critical about how you're using your
Yeah,
energy and
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, these are agreed things, and this is a highly technical, and some of with the industry you need to do. But do you think for that, at least from the supplier point of view, you need to build a very strong narrative for that?
I think also again for this to happen, I think because it's the same. The steel industry in Pakistan is very much alike. So it's the same unit that is being used with variations. So I think having some kind of network where all these, I mean, you don't have to invent anything from scratch all the time. So sharing the experience, how to optimize the reheating furnace, how to
Right.
optimize the induction furnace. I think it's doable, and there is a lot of easygoing projects that you can just do with a minimum amount of investment. And then, of course, you can prioritize to what extent will your ambition.
Right. Thank you very much for sparing your valuable time for this very important discussion. So, for the audience, the bottom line is that the low hanging fruits are that the industry should become more efficient, and the furnace are all over the industry in Pakistan Steel. They're very similar to one another. There should not be any wastage of energy, as they say. They should be optimized and do it in a way that reduces the carbon footprint. But in the long run, the industry should come up that they should use the renewable electricity, use hydrogen, and then use red fuel. And then they should be doing something on the supply side as well. I think when the discussion goes on, that yields good result. So let's keep our finger crossed. That's all for today. Bye for now. Thank you.